Okay, we can start.
Actually, more than 90% of the Roma do not speak Romani anymore. I didn't know that time that something like this, that Romani studies exist. Many places, it's simply disappearing, this dialect.
Welcome to our conversations with Romani linguists. My name is Anastasiia. I'm a promoter of the Romani language, history, and culture.
And I'm Yaron, and I'm a linguist specializing in the Romani language.
In this series of interviews, we talk to linguists working on the Romani language. And we are eager to know how they became interested in deeper research into the Romani language, what challenges they faced on their professional paths, and what fascinating stories and discoveries they had. And today we are pleased to introduce our guest, Zuzana Bodnárová. Zuzana is a researcher at the Plurilingualism Research Unit of the University of Graz. Zuzana, thank you very much for agreeing to join us and to share your experience in the Romani field.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
So, and now we could start, and I'd like, first of all, ask you about your background, and could you tell us, please, where you grew up?
So I was born in eastern Slovakia, in a small village which is at the border with Hungary. Like in Slovakia, in southern Slovakia, there is the Hungarian-speaking minority living, and I'm a member of this minority. So my mother tongue is Hungarian, and in this village where I grew up, basically everybody speaks Hungarian. Only my grandmother not. She was the first one who arrived there from the Polish border. She's an ethnic, it was not Slovak, but Goral. This is an ethnic group at the Polish border. Yes. So I grew up in that village, and I lived there until I was 18 years old. I went to a primary school and the gymnasium, and these were with Hungarian as a language of instruction. And then I decided that I want to study further. And I didn't know that time that something like this, that Romani studies exist. I have to admit, I had no idea about that. But a friend of mine went to work to Prague, to the Czech Republic. She was a nurse. She worked in a hospital. And she called me that I should also come there to live. And then I decided, okay, then I will search something like some kind of university where I could continue after gymnasium in Prague. And then I have to say I was a person, and I'm even now like who is interested in many different kind of things. Like this is only one thing what I'm making with Romani, or I'm interested in Romani, but there are different things. So not to be surprised that actually I started to study mathematics and physics in Prague the first year, but then I realized, okay, this is not really what I want. Then I tried to get to the university, to this Romani studies, but there was the problem that my primary school, as I told, and the gymnasium was with Hungarian as a language of instruction, and actually my Czech language skills were not on that level. I was not admitted to the university, so I didn't even get to that point that they would interview me or speak with me to the oral exam. I didn't get, so they didn't ask me anything about the Rama, but simply I was not admitted because I did not pass a test which was in the Czech language at the beginning. And then second year I studied electrical engineering. But then in the meantime, I already knew, okay, this is very interesting for me, because then I read about Romani, and I also enrolled in a course. I was not a student that time, but I asked there at the university if I can visit the Romani course. And I just, like, my interest raised with the time, I would say. And then the next year I again tried to get to this, to get admitted to the Romani studies, and then it was already successful. I got admitted, and then I started to study Romani studies, and also with the combination with cultural studies.
So it's
So
very interesting. And so we could say that what languages did you speak when you were a child? So at home and at school?
Yes, like Hungarian, I spoke Hungarian. Like the mother tongue of my mother was Slovak, but she did not speak Slovak to me or in the family, because in that village everybody spoke only Hungarian except of my grandmother. So I spoke Slovak and Hungarian, these two languages, but Hungarian was kind of like this first language for me, or like the most important.
And
And then I learned Czech later in the Czech Republic in those first 2 years, and then I could really like switch, and there was already a time, which is interesting, like I could speak much better Czech than Slovak. I'm from Slovakia, but then it's like kind of like two languages which are quite similar, and then it was already at the beginning like a mixture what I spoke, but then it became like really Czech. But now I can already differentiate between the two and switch if it's needed.
yeah, but actually they are different languages. Of course, there are a lot of similarities, but they are different. And yeah.
Yes, a lot of young people say that they do not understand, but those times when I studied there, for example, for the older generation who grew up in the Czechoslovakia, it was absolutely not a problem. They allowed also at the university that we at oral exams that we speak Slovak. It was not a problem.
Okay, I see. And you mentioned that you got interested in Romani not in the childhood, so it happened when you were at university.
When I was searching for like what to study, and then I realized that something like this Romani studies exists. But before that, I have to say also that I come from Eastern Slovakia, and in Slovakia, most of the Roma live in the eastern part of the country. Then, of course, also in the village where I lived or primary school where I went, there were 10-20% of Romani pupil. Nowadays, for example, today, that primary school where I went that time, nowadays there are 100% of Roma students, just Romani pupils are there in that school, for example. Even in the gymnasium, I had like one friend there, a Roma, who went to gymnasium. So it's not like that. It was something like exotic for me, or how to say, like I just knew Roma. But I have to say that in that small region where I live, the Roma speak only Hungarian. They do not speak Romani. But like 2-3 villages farther away, in those villages, there is already a region where they start to speak Romani, or they still speak Romani. But there, exactly in this village and the surrounding villages where I grew up, already for generations, they do not speak. They speak only Hungarian. And this was also interesting for me when Roma from northern Slovakia moved to this area, because there is a nearby town, Košice, like the second largest city. And they moved there to this region, and they spoke Romani. And already that time I had some contact already with Romani, because like the Roma from this area who did not speak, they learned some words, but some swear words and such funny things, like for what was funny for that time for pupils. And then I learned also from them those words, but there was, I cannot say that I prepared myself to study Romani studies, because I had no idea that something like this exists. Yeah. And then when I saw that in Prague at the Charles University, there is a possibility to study Romani, the Romani language and history and literature and so on, then I became like really interested. But I have to say my interest raised with the time, and later when I was admitted, and the teachers there at the university, they motivated the students to do field research. And they're very important, because this you rarely find. They really supported us and motivated us to go to Slovakia or Czech Republic or Hungary or wherever you want, but learn also Romani from the Roma, do some recordings, which is always like, no matter if you have a project or not, because in many places it's simply disappearing, this dialect. It's simply there is a language shift towards Slovak or Hungarian and so on. So it's always valuable, whatever you record. And they motivated us. And then my interest started to raise with that I did field research, because I did also field research in in Hungary, for example, I lived with the Roma family for 1 year. This was for my master thesis. I wrote about the grammatical the grammatical description of that dialect. This is like it's called kind of like, we can call it like a language island in Hungary, because there is one village where this Romani dialect is spoken, but the closest village where a similar dialect is spoken is like 100, 150, or maybe even 200 kilometers far away from that village. So they don't even know that somewhere the Roma who live in that village, they don't even know that there are other Roma who speak their dialect. So and I became interested in that that variety, and I decided that I want to describe that variety, and I moved there and I lived there for 1 year. And even before that, because I started to learn the so-called Slovak Romani, it's called, at the university, and I was a volunteer in a kind of like an isolated Romani settlement in eastern Slovakia for 2 months. And although I had no like I never worked with children before, but this was about to organize some activities for Roma children in that settlement. But I decided to do that because I really wanted to learn Romani, because this, like, you can really do it only like that. I think, like, okay, if someone is really good and can learn from books, but this is something different when you really are exposed to that language every day, basically. And those 2 months like changed a lot, and really, like, my interest, how I told, it just got more deeper, or like raised my interest with the time, how I did already those field researches. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for this story. You know, I know that Yaron prepared some questions about your Romani studies, but now I just want to ask you, what about now? Do you work with the Romani language now?
Yes. Like now I work at the Plurilingualism Research Unit in Austria. Yeah, okay, yes and no, because like in the last months, I started to work on a project together with 2 colleagues from Hungary, from Budapest, and now we became interested about what is preserved from Romani in the speech of those Roma who do not speak already Romani. So for many generations, they speak Hungarian. So in Hungary, actually more than 90% of the Roma do not speak Romani anymore. And in most of the places, this language shift towards Hungarian happened already centuries ago, probably. We don't know exactly, but we already know that at the end of the 19th century, most of the Roma did not anymore speak Romani. But still, after so many years passed away, they still preserved something, like also Romani words, but these are not just words, but kind of like calques, like these translations from Hungarian to Romani. These are mostly curses and oaths, which are like very important, or like they see it as typical, but they say it in Hungarian, but these are translations, let's say, from Romani, although they do not speak Romani, again, I say. So at the moment, I'm doing research, or I'm interested in this topic. So we cannot really say like like this is the Hungarian language, a variety of the Hungarian language, or a Romani ethnolect of Hungarian, we can call it. But before this, like since I work here in Graz, I did some research also about Romani, or I worked together with a Roma woman. She's a native speaker of Central Romani. This is dialect spoken in Hungary, Romani dialect. And she, for example, I supported her, motivated her to write a book, which is like not a scientific work now, but I think like it's kind of like more important for me that this book that this book was written and published, because this is very important, that also native speakers start to write and produce texts, and not only kind of recordings where I'm talking and influencing also them with my talk, but like really like that native speakers producing also like kind of texts in the dialect. Yeah.
Very interesting.
So after you finished your MA dissertation that you told us about,
Yes.
you did in Hungary, you went on to do a PhD, right? And that was also on Romani.
Yes, like my PhD, it was like there started like after my MA studies, there was an idea to do a project where we would document and systematically document the varieties of Romani in Central Europe, and but there was needed that I'm enrolled in PhD studies. Otherwise, I would not be able to work on that project. So it also was not my plan, but somehow it happened. And then, this project started. I don't know now, 2011 maybe, or I'm not sure, 2009 or 2011. Like it was a 3 years project, and we documented these Central Romani varieties in Central European countries like Slovakia, Poland, Ukraine, Hungary, Slovenia, and Austria. And like my part was to document the varieties which are spoken in these Hungarian-speaking regions, or there where, like earlier, it was Hungarian speaking, like in Austrian border region, in Slovenian like at the border region in Slovenia, which is near to Hungary, and then in Hungary and the southern Slovakia. So and then I thought, okay, like it makes sense if this project is already there and we got some data, that I write my PhD thesis about a dialect group which is called Romani. It's spoken in Western Hungary. And I wrote about the social linguistic situation and the grammatical description of those varieties. And this was very important, or I see it very important, because before our research, or before this project, actually we knew only about 2-3 villages, or just a small region, which was referred to in the literature, that there are speakers of this variety, of this Romani, but we did not know where else. Like it was always told in Western Hungary somewhere, but Western Hungary is pretty big, but we didn't know where they live. So I went there and I really did my field research. I never organized through some mediators or activists or NGOs. I never contacted anyone. I just arrived there. I went there by bus. I arrived there, I was looking for someone who speaks Romani, and from that village I tried to get to the next village, and again to the next village, and I was surprised how far I could get in this Western Hungary, because I started in southwestern Hungary, where we knew that there are really speakers, and I got totally to the north, which borders with Slovakia, which was like really interesting, because we did not know that there are also speakers in the north. But in that area, it was very interesting that it was almost everywhere Romani was already gone. In most of the villages, they always told me, "Why didn't you come 20 years ago? Why did the last person died who spoke something? Or why didn't you come last year?" or so on. But still, I could find some cases where a man was raised up by his grandparents, for example, such special cases, and he had still some knowledge of Romani. So it was like, really, I felt then that it's very important what we are doing in this project, because it's really, those dialects are only on my recordings. And back to this version where I lived in this one village where I lived for 1 year, for example. This is also a good example to exemplify what I mean with that there are around 700 Roma living in that village, and the village has altogether maybe 900 inhabitants. 700 from them are Roma. And that in 2006, 2007, approximately, when I lived there 1 year. And it was very hard for me to find anyone who could still speak Romani already that time, only the oldest ones. And 1 or 2 of such cases where they still, like from the grandparents or so on, they learned Romani. And I was there 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I went there, and I could only go to the graveyard and putting the flowers because everybody died with whom I did interviews that year when I lived there. So 6 people whom I interviewed, but this was, I say, really hard to find them because nobody knew who could still speak because nobody hears anyone speaking, right? And so it's again a case where there is a dialect which is actually only on those recordings, and I now regret why didn't I do more recordings when I was there 1 year. But in some situations that time I also didn't feel appropriate, like all the time, like I wanted to build also a relationship with that family, and not all the time putting there some recorder on the table. So of course now I already kind of regret, because I have a lot of many hours of recordings. But still, now when I see that, I thought, okay, it's maybe still 50 years, maybe there will be still someone, but it's not 50 years. It's now 20 years passed away and nobody lives there anymore.
You capture in your PhD, you capture this whole notion of language disappearing or still surviving under the term language vitality.
Yes.
Which is a term that social linguists often use. Can you tell us a little bit about, from the kind of scientific point of view, how does one go about to try and research language vitality? What are the questions, and what are the methods that you use to try and assess language vitality? Because you say you were there practically as the language was disappearing, and it's now extinct, like many languages. We talk about endangered languages of the world, and here's one variety that you say is now extinct. So how does one go about? What are the questions that you ask?
Like we had because I we had also or that time from an earlier project, we had kind of we used a social linguistic a questionnaire where there were questions about language acquisition. When do the children learn the language, whether they learn it or not, how the language is passed on to the further generations, the domains of language use. Where is this language used? Is it used still within the family or just in the village, or there are some situations elsewhere outside of the village or with other Romani communities? In this case not, because this is only this village where it's spoken. Or whether the language appears in the media, in the education, and so on. But this is also absolutely, it was not the case. So this questionnaire was the one thing, but I spent there 1 year. And of course, I did interviews, several hours of interviews, and we touched upon every kind of topic. It was not a very systematic interview, or there were no questions prepared. But all these aspects actually we could see I could investigate or look at all these aspects. Yes.
You talked about your work on the Atlas project, the Atlas of Central Romani, which is what prompted you to do a PhD. And I suppose since that's what prompted you to do a PhD, it's what really opened up the pathway to become a professional researcher and make a career out of that, right? And in some of the publications and lectures that you produced from your work, you have maps of dialects, which is something that linguists often do. Now I want to ask you about that, because some of the maps that I saw in your work, they have very, very smooth lines. So there's a line where on this side of the line, people say this word, and on that side of the line, they say that word. And you can see those lines, the same lines again and again for different words. So it gives you the impression that on one side of the line, this dialect is spoken, and that side of the line, another dialect is spoken. And many people who don't really know about Romani in detail, they think, well, it's spoken everywhere. It's not a territorial language. Many people think that Romani people travel, especially in Western Europe. That is the But I understand in the area where you worked, Roma have been settled in the same
Settled.
place for many, many generations.
Exactly.
So what's the profile in terms of geography of dialects? Is it similar by and large to other languages of populations that have been farmers or workers, and where dialect is always related to place? So the farther away you go from where you are, the more different the dialect becomes.
Yes, like in this case, I would say yes, but still, like there are such cases, like for example, this Central Romani, which is spoken in Central Europe. But I told all those countries like Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Austria, and Slovenia, and the Ukraine, part of Ukraine. There is like like the northern dialects are called like North Central dialects, and the southern ones are South Central dialects. And between these two dialects groups, there is also, I wouldn't say it's sharp, but in many, like there are many features which like run at the same or approximately at the same line. And there is, for example, no there is no some geographical, like, so there is no, between these two dialect groups we don't find any river or something which would divide them. And then we can speculate about why is this division between these two dialect groups, because there is like also, we cannot say that to the south it starts like the Hungarian speaking population and to the north the Slovak speaking. This also does not hold, and there is no reason why to like believe that this division somehow naturally became there, like that. We believe that, for example, the South Central speakers arrived probably a little bit later, or these were two different migrations. So we can read out something about the migration history of these populations also. But that's the other thing is, it's really true that for this dialectological research, comparison of the differences between the dialects, it's a very good case. The Central Romani is a very good case, because the speakers were, how you told already, like settled for centuries, and we can really divide, or we can really see the dialect groups, subgroups, regions, that how these innovations spread in those small areas. And yeah, and this is really indeed fascinating with this. It was very, very interesting in this project. Yes.
And Romani people are always bilingual, and every Romani dialect incorporates elements from the other languages. And I suppose that, I know that to study Romani dialects, you need to have some knowledge of the contact languages, which, of course, in that area you have. And you've also investigated some of the contact influences on those dialects in that area. And I wanted to ask you particularly about vowel length. So vowel length, for those of our listeners who are not familiar, is just intuitively something that distinguishes between the length of a vowel. Perhaps you can give us a few examples. And you say that in Romani, generally that doesn't exist, or maybe it did in the past, but doesn't exist in most Romani dialects. But in that particular area, vowel length emerges as a contact phenomenon because people sort of imitate it from the other languages. Can you give us a couple of examples and maybe explain how does that work? How do you think that, why do people all of a sudden start imitating something that exists in their other languages and import it into their own language?
Okay, some examples, like for example, there are also only Romani words, a pair of Romani words, for example, where the one is with short vowel and the other with a long vowel. So for example, one which comes to my mind is bar. Bar is like a stone, and bar with the long vowel is the garden. So there is already the difference, bar and bar. And then another example which comes to my mind is like a Romani word and a loan word, like a pair. So for example, you have scero, which is a head, scero with the long E, but scero, a short one, this means beer, the alcoholic drink, beer. Because it's in Hungarian, it's sör, but it became scero, o scero in Romani, but o scero is like the head, yes?
So if you have too much shero, it goes up to your shero.
You're gonna, exactly. I say it in German, yes, exactly. And so how it developed, like in this Romani dialect, it developed in that way that you had it was usually the penultimate syllable, so not the last one, but before the last syllable, like in this example what I told, like shiro, which became in the past, which was in the past like the stressed vowel, so shero. So no, it's not like in Vlach Romani. Vlach Romani, it's usually the last syllable which is stressed, but in this dialect, the before the last one is stressed when it's an open syllable, and then this open syllable stressed ones became long vowels. It was usually this process.
So before they said shero, and then they said shero, and then they said shero.
Exactly.
Like that.
Exactly.
Okay. And why do you think that happens? Why do such changes happen in language, do you think?
Because most probably, because like Hungarian had a huge influence, of course, like for centuries, like they were bilingual or multilingual in some cases in Hungarian and Romani, and Hungarian had on the phonetics of Romani a huge influence. Also, for example, like the disappearance of h. So there is not hal to eat, but hal, h. And many other changes happened under the influence of Hungarian, because it's easier easier for the speakers to not to have
just
totally different systems, but kind of it's simplifying and becoming like not one or not the same, but it's getting more similar because it's easier to process and to produce those words.
In one of your works, you talk about revitalization of languages. So you talked about tell us about how one looks at vitality and what is revitalization. And I just want to ask you, maybe to conclude with, when languages disappear, you were expressing before your sadness that you said you might have done more to document. But do you think that linguists it's part of their job to try and maintain languages? And have you had opportunities? Have you been approached by speakers, users of the language, to maybe advise how can we keep our language, or what can we do to bring it back? Is there any involvement in that direction?
Yeah, my personal view is that no, linguists do not have the responsibility, but if there is from the side of the community and some need or like they approach me, then or a linguist, then I think then there is already a responsibility on the linguist side to take part in that or to help, because in many cases there is the case that they would have the idea or they would like to have a dictionary or whatever, but they would need someone who help in that work. So no, in that yes, and then another thing, I'm actually, because like with this one Roma woman who is a native speaker of South Central Romani from Northern Hungary, we did together a web page, which and a Facebook page we also have, which popularizes the this Romani variety which is disappearing. But this was the idea of both of us to do it, Like there is no project behind it. There is no money. We do it in our free work. So it's like free time, sorry. So, and I found this a very good thing to do, because like from her side, it was also the motivation, from my side also. And I really saw this, that it could be a platform to meet, or like to bring those people together who are interested in this in this dialect. And it really did. It really did, because almost every month there is someone coming, or someone finds us on the internet. It's called VakerMore.hu, the web page, and always someone finds us or is interested, or there were already like some interviews made with us, and so on, and articles written, and this I find very good, that it popularizes, because this variety is absolutely invisible in Hungary. This variety, people have no idea about that. There are still Roma who speak this variety, because they think that the Roma who call themselves Hungarian Roma or Romungro, that they speak only Hungarian, which is not true, because there are still some places where the language is still preserved, and although not learned by the youngest generation, but there are still speakers of this variety.
Well, that's lovely, because you started answering that question in a very humble way. We can't, we shouldn't, we don't really have the responsibility. It's not us. But it seems that you've opened up a huge pathway there to raise awareness of the language, and I'm sure give a lot of pleasure and confidence to the people who are speakers or have ancestors who are speakers. So finally, what do you think, if we're looking to the future, both in general, what is perhaps one question that you would single out that researchers really should pay attention to in looking at Romani, a big piece of the puzzle, or something that we still didn't know and need to know? And within that, where do you see your role? What is your, and it doesn't have to be the same, what's your next step, or your next ambition? Something that you would like to achieve and to look into and explore in the Romani language?
Okay, maybe I start with the second part of the question, because I will actually, this is my most probably my last project, what I'm working on, what I told, like this variety of Hungarian spoken by the Hungarian Roma, which has like these Romani words preserved by them. And after this, I'm most probably, not most probably, but it's for sure, I will leave the academic field. But the one thing what I want to keep is this project, which is like this web page, which I just told before. As a hobby, I want to continue with that, and with this Facebook page. But in the future, because there is not a possibility here to continue at this university, and since I have children and family, we want to stay here in Graz, so that is the main reason. And I will do something different. I already have ideas, so this is my future plan. So there won't be more projects. Sorry, what was your first question?
The first one, well, what do you think that the community of researchers as such should look into? What is a one big question? I'm sure there's many, but one question that you would single out that you would like to see explored and perhaps answered?
I would like to see explored the so-called Transylvanian Romani variety in Hungary. Also, because in Hungary we know only about a few villages, but all the time when I'm in Hungary, like there are people coming and telling me, hey, there are also people who call themselves Romungro, but when they say some features, I find out it's not about Central Romani, it's about Transylvanian Romani. And this I would find like very interesting to look at, because from Eastern Hungary we have no historical data. So we don't know what kind of Romani dialects were spoken there, and this could give us like some help if we document those varieties there.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for your time. This has been really a fascinating journey with all sorts of fascinating highlights, and it's very sad to hear that your planning and circumstances are pushing you out of academia, but who knows, that might change. And in any case, one of the beautiful things about academic work is that one leaves a legacy. One has publications and websites and other things, and some of them you said you'll continue to be involved in, and that's great to hear. So thank you very much from both of us, and we wish you success in all your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
And thank all of you for watching this interview. We are looking for your reactions, comments on this video, and see you soon in our next episodes. Devlesa.